In this video, I'm going to be explaining and breaking down some interesting points about a video I just released comparing and contrasting various modes using a single composition that I wrote. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it on screen as well as in the description below, so you can go check that out before you watch this one. So I created that modes video as a means of comparing and contrasting the emotional effect of each of the standard major scale modes against one another. And I've never done something like this. I've never taken a single composition and move it through parallel modes in this way. I didn't even know if you could actually do it in a way that made sense and actually kept it coherent, although I learned so much about it in the process, and now I understand, of course, you can do that. As well, it allows for a comparison of the sound of each mode in a unique way that I've not seen before. There's a huge amount of information out there on the internet about modes, but a lot of it relates to improvisation, or at least melodic playing, but I've not seen much talked about in terms of actually composing music using modes, staying in a specific mode. So the first thing I did was create a simple, traditional style melody that is 8 bars long and hits every note of a given key. So I wrote it originally in C Ionian or C major, and it hits every note of the C Ionian mode. We can listen to that now. The process kind of started with writing this melody, 8 bars long, that touches on every note of the mode, and then keep every element the same as much as possible while only changing the mode, so that whenever we transpose into a parallel mode, like C Lydian for instance, you're going to hear every note of that mode. From there I took a piano and harmonized in a fairly simple traditional way the melody, using mainly triads. This gave me a kind of like reduced version of what I was going to then orchestrate. I had this melody, I had the piano harmony, and then I split this out across the orchestra, which we can take a look at shortly. From there, I did the same thing in each mode, and every time I transpose the melody into a parallel mode, the melody slightly changes. Some of the notes have to move to conform to the current mode, as in Ionian is just all natural, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whereas Phrygian has flat 2, flat 3, flat 6, flat 7, and so the notes of the melody change to fit the changed notes of the mode. Once I had finished creating all of these little reductions, I went to Ionian and basically broke it out across the orchestra, spent some time making this arrangement till I was happy with it, and then I would just move the arrangement over, copying all the parts over to the next mode, and then transposing or modifying, in a certain sense, all the notes of all the instruments to fit the new mode. Now, it's not quite so simple as that. In every case, I have to change the harmony slightly. You know, it might go 1, 4, 5 in this one, and it goes 1, 2, 4 in this one, or so on. That's just because the challenge of writing music in a specific mode diatonically, that means sticking to the mode and not going outside of it while still changing chords and all this, is that it's easy to lose the sense of where the key center is. And that's what I wanted to focus on here. I wanted to make sure that the arrangement, the harmonies, everything was really giving a strong sense of the quality of that mode while always maintaining the felt sense of where the key center is. Of course, you can't do one without the other. If you're going to try to give the sense of the mode, you have to maintain where the key center is, because it is the key center that is giving meaning to the notes of the mode and produces the feeling of it. So this means that each version is very, very similar in terms of its arrangement. The instruments come in and out at the same time. They have the same rhythms and such, but the actual notes change, the actual harmonies change progression. It's not identical, but it's very close. And then the melody is, of course, following the exact same contour, but its notes are just modified to fit whatever the current mode is. So in general, there's not that much new to listen to in each one, except for the emotional effect that the new notes have created. There's not new arrangement or instrumental parts coming in and out in each version. Now, if you have some familiarity with modes already, you might be wondering why I chose the set of modes I did, meaning why did I leave out Locrian and what is a magic mode, and also why do they appear in the order that they do. So I didn't put Locrian in there because, as far as I'm concerned, Locrian can't actually function as a stable key center, right? It doesn't have a perfect fifth in it. So you have a 1 and a flat 5, and due to that, how that interfaces with the harmonic series and how our hearing works and all this, having a diminished chord as your tonic home chord doesn't really work. I did try. I did try to make a version in Locrian as best as I could, and I can play that for you in the piano reduced version here. Even though you might think, oh, it sounds pretty good or interesting, I don't actually feel that the intended tonic chord sounds like a tonic chord. It actually, to me, sounds like we're hearing that composition in a relative mode, a relative Aeolian or a relative Phrygian mode. Now, as for magic mode is simply a blend of all 6 previous modes together, meaning all those notes are available to be used interchangeably in all sorts of interesting combinations. And the name comes from one of my greatest musical inspirations. He goes by W.A. Matthew in his books, William Matthew, and his work has honestly revolutionized my musical understanding and changed my life in so many ways. I'm forever indebted to him. Other people would call it mixed mode, which is also completely applicable, or they think about it as borrowing from parallel modes. I'm just considering all the notes are now available, rather than thinking it's one mode and then it picks from here and it picks from here. They're just all there, and we can just use them in all sorts of interesting combinations, and you produce kind of the sound that I ended up with there. Now, as for the order in which the modes appear in the video, I put them in relative pairs. Now, this is a concept I don't really see talked about other places, but it's something that makes sense to me. You might be familiar with the idea of major and relative minor, relative major, relative minor, like C major and A Aeolian. Well, each of the modes, as far as my ear tells me, is in a relative pair, Ionian with Aeolian, Lydian with Dorian, Mixolydian with Phrygian. Lydian and Dorian are the brightest, like brightest major, brightest minor. Ionian and Aeolian are the middle level, and then the darkest major would be Mixolydian, and the darkest minor would be Phrygian. So arranging them in this way, in these relative pairs, we start with Ionian, which is the one I wrote first, and then we flip it to its relative minor, then Lydian to its relative, Mixolydian to its relative. I put them in this order because A, I like that experience of hearing the relative pairs together, and B, it allows us to contrast major with minor, major with minor, major with minor as it goes through the sequence, which makes just for a more interesting and enjoyable experience overall, rather than going, for instance, brightest to darkest from Lydian down to Phrygian, or just in standard order of the major scale, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, blah, blah, blah. And then mixed mode, obviously, at the end because it combines them all together. So though it's a bit unconventional, I think it actually leads to a more enjoyable experience of listening overall. So here's the actual session that I used when I was composing all of these. You can see all the modes written along the top here. At the top, I've got the piano reduction and the melody is down here. I used Omnisphere just for actually guitars, believe it or not. Even though I'm a guitar player, I decided to do them in MIDI this time, just to keep them very, very consistent. Then for the orchestral instruments, I'm using Spitfire's BBC-SO library, which I just love. And then for the lead flute, I'm using the 8DO Claire woodwind library for that. Here's the sound of Ionian. We can listen to that and look at the arrangement here as it progresses. There's a ton of tempo automation going on along the top to get this kind of organic type flow. And then they're spaced out by a bar just to, of course, keep the transitions musical between it. I hope the video was helpful for you and answered any questions you might have had about that previous modes video. If there's anything you're still confused about, if there's topics you want to go more deeply into. We could take a look at all the modes in turn. We could break down the orchestration of these things or whatever else. I'd love to hear from you. You can also contact me via my Discord server, which there's a link to in the description of this video, which is a kind of chat room type community that you can join and talk to me and other people about music theory, music production, composition, whatever else. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you soon in another video.